Best way to deal with losing is just boot up some Fortnite and kill some people. That's the best way to deal with losing in chess. So round 9, you guys, everybody. So here we go. So round 9. Let me flip the board. This would not be alt F4, unlike in the past, thankfully. So all right. So as I was saying at the end of round 8, you guys. So at the end of round 8, the standings were such that I was on 5.5 points. Lenier was also on 5.5 points. Fabiano was on 5 points, and I think Wesley was maybe on 4.5, and Sam Sevian was on 4. So realistically, going into this 9th round game, Lenier was the biggest threat because he had the 2 soft white pairings against A Wonder Liang and Timur Gureyev. Outside of the black against me in round 10, whereas I had black against Ray Robson, white against Lenier, and then in round 11 I had black against Jeffrey Zhang. So if we take that into context and then we compare it to the third player, Fabiano, who's in the running. Fabiano, I believe, had a tougher road. He had black against Varuzhin Akobian. He had white against Alexander Lenderman, and he had black against Sam Shanklin in round 11. Now that's the big key, because I expected Fabiano to win his round 9 game with black against Varuzhin and his round 10 game with white against Lenderman, but I figured in his round 11 game with black against Sam Shanklin, Shanklin would be Fort Knox and just like shut him down completely, which sure enough did happen. So I figured Fabiano could get to +4 as well. So we assume Fabiano gets to +4. I'm on +3 going to this game, so I have to win at least one more game to get to +4, and probably I need to get to +5, because realistically you have to assume Lenier is going to probably win both of his white games against A Wonder and Timur. Now of course I could always beat Lenier in round 10, but strategically you have to go on the assumption that chess most likely is going to be a draw when you have 2 very strong players playing. And in fact, every game between Wesley, Fabiano, and myself, and I think even Sam, we drew each other. All of us drew each other. So you have to look at it from the realistic standpoint that most likely I'm probably not going to beat Lenier. So if we conclude that my odds of beating Lenier are somewhere around 25-30%, 25 to 30%, maybe that I can win, most likely it's going to be a draw, you have to assume that the odds that Lenier is going to win one or both of those games are probably north of 50% by quite a bit. Thank you, Telu Mama, for subscribing with Twitch Prime. What is the duration of these games? These games could go up to 6 hours. But basically, just trying to explain to you guys that, beyond just the basic preparation, there's a lot of strategizing you have to do as well. Not 0% chance of loss, but it's something like, let's say, I don't know, 20% chance that I win, 5% chance that I lose, and 75% chance of a draw against Dominguez. It could even be higher, perhaps. But you have to assume Fabiano's going to win 2 games, most likely, because the odds dictate that. Lenier is probably going to win 2 games to get to +5 as well, and that definitely means that if I assume I'm not going to beat Lenier, I have to beat Ray with black, or I have to beat Jeffrey with black as well, because otherwise I'm not going to make a playoff. And so for that reason, the night before the game, I decided that, you know what, you have to kind of forget about the odds and the risk and all that stuff and just go for it, because you never really know how many times you're going to be in such a situation where you have a chance to win the US Championship. Specifically, for example, if you look at last year, Fabiano did really well and probably would have won the US Championship last year in any ordinary year. But then Sam got red hot and won. I think Sam went +6 last year, and he just ran the table, got super hot at the right time, and won the event. So when you conceptualize and you start thinking about it from that standpoint too, of where you never know how many times you're going to be in such a situation, you really have to just throw all caution to the wind and go all samurai, and just, if you run into the machine gun and you die, so be it. Like Tom Cruise did in that ridiculous movie. But at any rate, you got to take your sword out, and you have to go and try to slash them and win the game. BJH13 says, did I miss the Zhang game? No, Mr. BJH, you were showing up quite early. In fact, this is only the 2nd game. But yeah, so like there's a lot that goes on, especially deep in tournaments like this. In top events, for example, where everyone is so strong, you're going to assume that most people will draw the vast majority of the time. But when you're playing in a slightly weaker event, where weaker is very general term, but when it's a touch weaker, you really want to you really need to think about who your opponents are playing and take your chances, because as I said before, you really never know what tomorrow holds. I could go get hit by a bus tomorrow, and I'll never win another U.S. championship. I could also, like, you know, I could get Alzheimer's or something, and then I'm never gonna have a chance either. So you really have to take your chances when they present themselves, and for that reason, I just said, you know what, throw all caution to the wind, just go all in, have some fun, try to play chess like it was 2005, and also, I mean, really, just try to win it for all of you guys, because at some point when you've been playing chess for so long, it's not even so much about the money. It's much more, you need inspiration, you need something to keep you going. And when I was thinking about this before these last couple of games, it was very much, the fans, they're pulling for me. They're all here on Twitch rooting for me, and if you don't give it your all, take a chance and just stop worrying about rating or losing games, then really, what's the point of living? Honestly, if you're not going to take chances, when you're in the running to win a tournament as prestigious as the U.S. Championship, then really just don't bother even playing. Really, like, you just shouldn't bother. So BJ says he won it for Levy, not the rest of us. No, fun fact, speaking of Gotham Chess, also known as Levy Rosman, he was not a fan of my opening against Sam Sevian in round 3 when I played the C4 with the C4 E4 English. He was no fan at all of that, so it was definitely not for Levy. Yeah. Dr. Philos Hikaru, basically. Yes, but essentially that's sort of what I was trying to do, because I was thinking back to some of the earlier U.S. championships I'd played. In fact, one in particular in 2006, I believe it was. I think it was 2006 when I played against. I think I started off the event in 2006 with a draw against. I forget who I drew in round 1. I think it was someone decent, 24-50 maybe. Then in round 2, I lost this very, very bad game to Camilla Baginskate, women's grandmaster, international master, the wife of Alexander Yermolinsky. I played this maybe semi-terrorish. I played something very weird, and I lost this terrible, terrible game. So I had half point out of 2, and I think I even won a game in round 3 and drew a game in round 4. And so I was like 2 points off the lead after 4 rounds. I proceeded then to win 4 games in a row. I think it was 4, maybe it was 5. I think it was 4 games in a row. And then in the last round, I played black against Alexander Onishuk. It was a full point down. But if I won the game, I had a chance to tie him and tie for first place. Now, in that time, I think it was the top 2 players who played a playoff. So even if I had won, I would not have made the playoff. But the spirit and the inspiration to take a shot against Onishuk in that situation, I played a very dubious Benoni against him, and I still got a great position, had winning chances. But the moral is that in that game, I took big chances, even though I had no chance to win. And for that reason, it seemed like I was drawing a lot of inspiration from that game and from that event, where sort of I just said, you know what, I can't win the event, but just go all in, try to win every game. And I did put together a very big streak at the end. Unfortunately, I didn't beat Alex in that last round game. It was a draw, but nonetheless, the spirit of what I did in 2006 was very much in my mind when I approached these last couple of games. So, all right. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, this game against Ray went E4, and the other thing I would say about this game that was very tough is Ray is an opponent I've played many times, but I almost always seem to get black against him in the U.S. Championship. I think I beat him with white in the U.S. Championship maybe 2012 or 2013. But otherwise, I've gotten black, and I think every single game, and I've had black against him in games where it was almost must win. But for that reason, or not for that reason, but even despite it being almost must win, Ray's openings are so good and so solid and so sharp when you take risks that every time I played E5 against him on move 1, and I won one game in the first round in 2016 or 17 of the US Championship against him. But having lost 2 games in the Berlin already in this event, I knew that Ray would most likely, not bishop a6 obviously, that Ray would probably play something like rook e1, knight d6, knight e5, bishop e7, bishop f1. And he drew a game against Wesley in this earlier in the event as well. And considering that Ray was already, I think, on -1 or -2 going into this game, I felt, you know what, he's going to do this, so I really can't afford to play the Berlin against him. and just play classically solid. And so for that reason, I decided, you know what, let's go for it. Let's play the Sicilian. Ray played knight f3, played d6, d4, trade, knight f6, knight c3, and now I played g6. And I decided, you know what, Ray's played the Najdorf quite a bit. He's very well prepared against both the Najdorf and the Dragon. But I also felt these were the only two systems that I could consider to play against Ray for the win. But I figured at least in the Dragon, Ray would probably not be as prepared for it, and considering the fact that Ray tends to play the Yugoslav variations with bishop c4, they also tend to lead to sharper positions as well. Although you can lose in these positions with black if your opponent is better prepared sometimes. So all right, so bishop e3, bishop e7, f3 castles. Worth noting, you have to go bishop g7, not knight g4. Thank you, GM Hess. Thank you, Bobby, for reading with a party of 82. Good to see you, Mr. Robert Hess, the one and only grandmaster from New York City. Another very talented chess player. Came up just short in 2009 when I won the U.S. Championship. He finished half a point behind me. I won my last round game against Josh Friedel, and I think he drew his game. I forget who he drew in the last round, but he came up a half point. He finished half point out of first place in the 2009 U.S. Championship. So Robert is an absolute boss as well. Great commentary, especially of the final round game. I watched a little bit of his commentary after the fact from my win against Jeffrey. And I also heard that Bobby generally was getting things right in terms of his analysis and assessments of most of my games, unlike some of the commentators at times. So thank you once again, Bobby, for the raid, and thanks to everyone who's watching Robert's stream. We're here going over my games, pretty much the home stretch of the U.S. Championship. I already analyzed my 8th round game against Sam Shanklin, and now we're going over my 9th round game against Ray Robson, and then we'll go over the 10th round and 11th round games as well. So, Hess commentary, ELO is 2,900. Yeah, Robert's definitely a very strong chess player. I don't know why he doesn't just unretire and start playing more, because his last event he played in Isle of Man, he drew Anand. I think he was even better. So come on, Robert, let's go. Get out of retirement. Put on your helmet and get back in action, because we're missing you. So all right, so back to the game. Bishop e3. I played bishop g7. If knight g4, this is a well-known blunder. Bishop b5. If bishop d7, then white can play queen g4. I can't take the queen because of the pin, so I'm just down one piece here. So here I played bishop g7, f3. Am I challenging Robert to a match? No, but I'm just saying you got to unretire, man. You got to just start playing classical chess again. You're sorely missed. So f3. Here I castled. Ray played queen d2, knight c6. And here Ray played bishop c4. The other line is castles d5. This is a well-known line as well. I won a game against Jan-Christoph Duda in Gibraltar 2 years ago in this line with takes. Or no, I think Jan-Christoph did not take. I actually played queen e1, e5, knight c6, takes. And I won a very long game in this whole messy line, bishop c4, bishop e6. But that was a different game. So in this one, Ray decided to play bishop c4, playing the traditional Yugoslav attack with bishop c4, bishop b3. Here I played bishop d7, white castle. Also, just to talk about Bobby actually used to play this, instead of being a man and playing the dragon like real chess players, he tried to be a little bit of a wimp and play this a6 Dragdorf against Gadakomsky. Thank you, Gigi Yo for resubbing 6 months in a row. Robert played this a little bit smells bad kind of Dragdorf against God in the U.S. Championship. I think he made a draw, but I think that this is very suspect. GF has said, no, I played it before putting my bishop on g7. Yeah, this is true, but it's it's as Kasparov, it's not a voiceover, but Kasparov would always he would always go like he's sniffing the air, like someone's done something wrong anytime someone plays a bad opening. That's a very well-known Garyism, so I'll just do that as well, just so you guys understand where it's coming from. That's very much a Gary thing. It's just the sniff. That's Gary all the way. Gary would do that very frequently when he thinks something is dubious or bad. Gary would do that, so that's why I'm doing that right now in regards to Bobby's Dragdorf that he played against God all those years ago. But yeah, I did not play the drag door, fortunately, because if I did, I think I would have gotten smoked and blown off the board in like 20 moves. I played knight c6. Ray played bishop c4. Here I played bishop to d7. I need more isms. Bishop d7. So here Ray castled, and now I played rook b8. This is known as the easiest draw of my life. Hikaru hating on a Shanklin approved opening. All right, Robert. All right. So here I played rook b8. The other line is rook c8, bishop b3, knight e5. This is known as the Soltis variation as well. Black and white can play h4, g4. Many different setups here. But this is the line that Gary himself actually played against Vishy Anand in the 1995 World Championship match, and he won. I believe it was game 10 or game 12. He won with black in this line of the dragon. This is still playable as well, but very, very sharp too. But these days, it's, I think, worked out much more than the Chinese dragon. So I played rook b8. So here, Ray played bishop b3. Now I played knight a5. Now the idea behind rook b8 mainly is you want to support b5 without hanging a pawn. But more importantly, you also might want to go knight c4 and open up the b file so the rook can hit b2 here. So here, Ray played bishop h6. So we traded. Here I played b5. Continuing with the theme, e5 is also a playable move, but a much different line altogether. So I played b5. Robert drew Verusian Akobian in the 2009 US Championships in the last round. Okay, that's why. Okay, why not knight e5 instead of h5? Wait, a5 you mean, or what? a5? You mean knight e5, or what do you mean? I'm confused. You said knight h5 instead of knight a5. Do you mean knight e5? Flavius Josephus says, is he playing these moves from memory? I have the PGM file, so the actual moves from the game are in here. I would still remember them nonetheless, but all the sub variations are not in here. This is all me just doing it. Yeah, knight e5 is also playable. It's a completely different line. It's still a Chinese dragon. Knight e5 is playable. But for this game, I figured knight a5 is a little bit rarer, and Ray is less likely to be prepared for it. So that's why I played knight a5. So bishop h6 trades. What if white takes on a7? That is very, very dubious. Very, very dubious. If white plays knight c6, black can take bishop a7. I think rook b4, bishop b3, queen a5, followed by rook b8 or rook a8. There's going to be a lot of pressure here. c5, c4 is coming as well. The bishop on b3 is bad. And basically, just this whole queen side is very, very open. It just looks extremely dangerous, and white generally can get into a lot of trouble here. So grabbing the a7 pawn is not recommended. It's extremely dangerous here for white. So for that reason, knight c6 would be knight c6. Yeah, exactly. It looks like a benko on steroids. Exactly, because when you think about the benko, you basically get an open A and B file. But in this position, not only is it an open A and B file, but also his bishop's going to be on b3. His king is on the queen side as well. So everything just comes raging down both the A and the B files. Probably knight e4 threats, bishop b2, maybe even d5 or c5, c4, d4. Just everything is very, very loose here for white. So this is extremely dangerous in this position. So for that reason, it would be fairly suspect to. Street Poker says, but he does gain a pawn. A pawn for my kingdom, right? Isn't that the saying? I mean, it's all good, but at the end of the day, your king is worth a lot more than one pawn, and you aren't going to be reaching an end game either. A pawn for my kingdom. So for that reason, knight c6 is very suspect. So bishop b3, played knight a5 here. Ray played bishop h6. We traded. Now I played b5. e5 is also another line here as well, or I mentioned that earlier. So b5, knight d5. White can also try h4, but after knight b3, ab3, b4, this is very, very sharp. If white plays knight b3, I think b4 again takes, and is it a5, or I think queen c7 with the idea of bishop f5 is pretty good for black here. Maybe even e5. You can maybe play f6 as well. Play a5, a4, rook c8, queen c7. King's a little bit awkward. Bishop f5 is coming. I don't know if f6 is best, but it is a playable line. So for that reason, Ray played knight d5, trying to remove this defender so he can play h4, h5 right away. So here I played knight takes b3. He took. Yeah, so someone asks, is taking on h6 better than not? I think it's better for a few reasons. It's better because if you don't take, I think there are lines like this, for example, where after knight b3, knight b3, white's queen can go to d4 and hit the king on g7, or the pawn on a7. The b4 pawn is also loose, and the queen just in general has much more access on d2 than it does on h6. On h6, the only idea is to open the h file and mate on h7, whereas on d2 there are really all these nice squares here, and so for that reason, that's why you take on h6. That's why I takes b5. Here he played knight d5. Now I took. Ray took with the knight. Now I played e5. Logical, pretty much the only move I believe in this position, because if I play knight d5, I think after takes, well, there takes. There's also maybe rook d5, h4, h5, which is very dangerous here. And if e d5, white can bring the knight to d4 and c6, I think very, very quickly, on top of having h4, h5, opening up the h file. So I don't really want to take. And what e5 does here is, first of all, it cuts off this d4 square from the knight. So like in the game, actually, it's very thematic, this game, that it's very thematic in that basically the whole point of e5 was to restrict this knight on b3 and take advantage of this knight. And in fact, in the game, this is exactly what happens. So basically, these pawns control the two squares for the knight to access the king side very quickly. Rook Crusher says, I was shocked by e5 and thought, oh dear, Hikaru will lose now because of the hole on d5. Yes, but it is a temporary hole. But again, the knight on b3 cannot get to d5. You need like c1, e2, c3. And I can go bishop e6 and trade very quickly. And then he'll end up with a pawn on d5 or nothing at all on d5. So in the game, Ray took. I took. He played h4. Now here I played rook to b6. Or not rook b7, sorry, rook b6. Supporting the pawn so that after h5, I can go queen e7. And now you'll notice if takes, white cannot take, so I protect the pawn. As an example, if I play, I don't know, let's say rook b7, h5, queen e7. If h6, g6, f g6, white can play rook d6. And now if I take, there's checkmate on h7. So I can't take, which is why I decided that here, I felt that I needed to protect the pawn, and there really is no other satisfactory way to do it. So I played rook b6, h5, queen e7, trade. Now Ray played queen e3 because the rook supports the pawn. But more importantly, on top of the rook supporting the pawn, now I go bishop e6. And so somebody said, oh no, I thought Hikaru will lose because of the hole on d5. Yes, there's still a hole on d5 in the position, but you'll notice the only way white can take advantage is if the knight gets to d5. But the knight cannot get to d5 easily. It needs knight c1, e2, c3, d5. And on top of that, I can always just exchange my bishop for the rook. So it's going to take 4 moves for white to reach this endgame. Someone says, what about the queen trade? So you mean rook b6, h5, queen g7? Yes, queen g7 is also playable here. But instead, if white trades after takes, black is completely fine. Again, bishop e6, rook c8, like something like rook d2, king f6, rook d1, king e7, and black is completely fine here. But here, white does not trade queens. White, in fact, goes queen e3. And the problem is, if I play rook c8 now, the queen is a little bit off sides here on g7. White can maybe play h6. White can also maybe just trade. And if I take with the queen on g7, it looks more secure on e7, has more safety squares. White can also maybe play maybe h6 or even just rook d2, rook d1, followed by h6. And long term, there are going to be some issues. So let's just say I play, I don't even know what to play here. Queen f6, rook d1, queen e7, h6. You'll notice that here, this pawn on h6 can never be attacked. And I might get an attack on the queen side, but it's going to take a lot of time. The rooks are already doubled. And if I ever move the queen away from here, there might be issues on the dark squares again. So for that reason, I thought queen e7 was more precise, because I support the pawn, but I also keep more flexibility to maybe play on the queen side, queen c7. More pressure, h6 will never attack a queen and gain a tempo either. So queen e7 is just more precise, I think. So white trades. Fg6, queen e3, bishop e6. And so as I was saying, this hole on d5 actually is not a hole because the knight is dominated by the bishop on e6 here. And that's the whole reason that I played e5, is just the deep understanding that the pawn on e5 takes away a very critical square. This pawn on d6 is not weak. I cover the d5 square with my bishop. So everything here looks very, very solid for black. So for that reason, in this position, black is completely fine. Caballo or Caballo says interactive chat. Yes, Caballo, interactive chat. Yes, I'm interacting with all of you guys. Rich SMO says, do you think you overlooked e5? No, e5 is known theory. Again, welcome to chess in 2019. You do not come up with original concepts on move 10 anymore. Everything is known. Even if it hasn't been played, it's known. So no, Ray definitely was familiar with e5. So here Ray played rook f1, trying to play f4 and blast it up. As Jenna LOL says, best way to deal with losing. Best way to deal with losing is just boot up some Fortnite and kill some people. That's the best way to deal with losing in chess. So Ray played rook f1. He realized that here in this position conceptually, you're not going to be able to attack on the h file. Let's say you play rook h6 and rook h1. I can always play rook f7 and defend my kingside with one piece, the rook. And white has put two pieces over here which are offside. I can now bring my queen, play a5, a4, and the knight's bad, bishop is good. And I forget who said it, but there was someone who pointed out the concept that one of the great concepts is when someone is attacking, if you can hold everything together with one piece, then it frees up all the rest of your pieces. And so white's put all these pieces on the h file to attack. But after queen c7 or queen f6 and rook f7, the rook just holds all the glue together very easily. So yeah, so rook f7. Yeah, so you played rook hf1. How's it going, Kilimanjaro 9? Hope you're having a wonderful evening. So okay, rook f1. I played rook to c6 here, assessing that Ray basically wanted to play g3 f4 or just f4 right away. Try to open up the position right away because he realizes that I'm going to go queen c7, rook c8, and my attack over here is going to be a lot quicker than any attack on this h file. And g3 f4 is extremely slow. So Ray started to see the danger here. And so here Ray played f4. So here I played queen c7. Hitting the pawn on c2. White dancing rockstar says, why am I sub? I never asked for this. Someone gifted you a sub, or the Twitch algo gifted you a sub, White dancing rockstar. So make sure to enjoy the sub that you have. So here after queen c7, hitting the pawn on c2, Ray played rook d2, and now I just said allez, 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 all in, and I played a5 here, trying to attack on the queen side. Here Ray played king b1. Worth noting, if Ray plays f5 here, I can play a4, and white cannot take the bishop on e6 because then I take the rook on f1 for free. If you have to move the knight, you can only put the knight on a1. The knight on a1 is very, very ugly, very out of play. Maybe long term you can go c3, knight c2, knight b4. But here black can also just take and play rook f5. If rook f5 takes queen g5, bishop g6 is good. Bishop pawn supports the bishop, no checks for the queen. And more importantly, c2 is super weak, and white has no attack here. Because white really needs like an h or an f pawn. So he needs to put a pawn on f5 or h5, and with a pawn on g4, you can't even attack. So for that reason, f5 would be suspect. Because f5 just drops a pawn. That's the main problem here for white, is that basically any of these positions where it looks like white's getting an open king. In fact, white's never getting an open king because the bishop is so strong on g6 and the queen covers all the squares right around the king. Then in fact, black's just up a pawn and completely winning with a completely safe king on g8. And that's also the other very deep point in this, is that all these ideas with f5, they look like white might get a raging attack here, but white never even sniffs an attack. If white tries queen g5, then I can just play queen g7, and again, I'm just up a pawn here. So the real problem here is that these ideas with f5 are extremely slow, and in most cases don't even work. My king actually just, like, when you look at this position, it's like, oh no, the king's wide open. But the king is just never open because I can just plop the bishop on g6 where it's supported by a pawn, and then white's just getting mated on c2. So why a5? Why a5 instead of e takes f4? I did not play e takes f4 for one very basic reason. If I play ef4 and trade, white gains access to the super critical d4 square. The line I gave, yes, black loses a5. I'll just show it again quickly. Sorry, not takes. Queen g5, queen g7, trade. But if knight a5, rook a6, now you're going to lose the pawn at a2. If you play b4, you lose this one. Now I'm getting this pawn clump in the center that's going to rule the day as well. So this is no good. you move the knight to b7, I think rook a2, idea rook a1. If king b1, just rook a8, rook a1. Gonna lose more material this way. If white plays knight b3, same thing, just take the pawn, clump will rule the day again. Same thing, GG. If you play e takes f5, I can just take the knight. You can't take the bishop because then you hang the rook on f1, so it's just winning. So that's why white is just busted. So someone was saying, what were they saying? They're saying, someone was saying, oh yeah, why didn't I take on? I didn't take because the whole concept is I need this structure to dominate the knight. So when I trade, after takes queen f4, white gains access to d4 square, and from d4, white's knight jumps right back into the game, and white is not even worse anymore. I probably have to take on b3 and play a slightly worse end game. So that's why e takes f4 is no good, because again, it's very conceptual here. If I understand that f5 is not a threat, then why do I want to activate this knight from b3? I want to dominate this knight with the pawn on e5, and if f5 is not a threat, then you just go ahead and just keep attacking. So for that reason, I played a5. Ray played king b1. I played a4. He played knight to c1. Now you see I can take on f4 if I want to, because the knight, it's going to take time to get to d4. It's an extra tempo to get to d4, whereas from b3 it hops there in one go. So a4 knight c1. Here I played b4 again. Again, f5 is not a threat, so white can't take because you would hang the rook on f1 as before. You can't go f5 again because takes. If ef5, I just play rook f5. Trade, takes, queen g5, bishop g6, and now I've got the monster bishop on g6. King is completely safe with the bishop around it. Queen controls all the squares. So for that reason, it's very, very safe here. If white can't really play f5. Exact same issues as before. Very passive knight. I'm also coming right down the board with my pawns. My attack is much quicker than white's attack on the king side, if it ever gets there at all. So here Ray played rook df2. Which game is this? This is round 9 against Ray Robson from the US Championship. So at this point in the tournament, I was tied for first place with, thank you Sazerac for resubbing 3 months in a row. Congrats, champ. Thank you so much. This is round 9. So I was tied for first place with Lenny Dominguez going into this game, and this is round 9. So rook df2. So I played e takes f4 now. Now you'll notice here it's different. So you see I've kicked the knight back. c2 is also super vulnerable. And most importantly here, f5 is a very serious threat. So like if I play, I don't know, rook c8, f5, if I take and play bishop d5, maybe I'm okay here, but it's starting to look a little bit scary with like queen g5 or f6 and queen g5, f7. You'll see the bishop is not really getting to g6 here, and there is a very nice nail in the coffin here with this pawn on f6, which is really a big issue to play around. Without the pawn, if I could put the bishop on g6, it's fine. With this pawn on f6 and the rooks behind it trying to force its way to f8, it's this is very dangerous here. So for that reason, rook c8, f5 is really bad for black. But at the same time, I can't really prevent f5 because I can't go bishop f7 because then he'll. So if I play a move like, let's just throw in a random a3, f5. If I play something like bishop f7, white can take, and I can't take with the bishop because I lose the rook. And if I take with the pawn, then he's gonna start mating me on the open h file here. So for that reason, I can't really keep avoiding f5. f5, f6, or fg6 is a huge threat here. But I've also gotten everything I wanted by pushing the knight back to c1, so he doesn't have knight d4. And now it's important to just not worry about, throw caution to the wind, trade, and play rook c8. So now I'm tripling here on the c file, threatening the pawn on c2. If white plays like queen f2, I can just go queen to e7, for example. And if white plays knight d3, here I do sack on c2, trade, king c2, and bishop a2 is probably good. I can probably also play b3 here, or even just d5 maybe. And this is really bad for white, because white, not only do I have a queen and a pawn, but my bishop is still probably better than his knight, even after bishop c4. Because e4 is loose, g2 is loose. If I can ever go queen g5 and put pressure, not to mention the pawns on the queen side are also loose here. So this is very dangerous for white and probably losing. So it's worth noting that in this position after e4, rook f4, I did use 30 minutes before playing rook c8. The reason I used all the time was because I was trying to calculate queen f2, queen f3, and rook f6. So those are the only 3 moves that make sense here. If white plays queen f3, I cannot take the pawn because of rook f8 check. If I trade, I get mated. If I go king g7, there's queen f6, king h6, rook h1, bishop h3, rook h3, which is also checkmate. But at the same time, after queen f3, I can probably just play queen to e7 here, supporting the f8 square. I've already got the f7 square covered with this really nice bishop on the diagonal. Bishop a2 before queen takes c2. Ah, yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. I knew. See, and this is what I'm saying. So I do occasionally forget a little something from my analysis, which is right. After queen c2, there's this very nice in between with bishop takes a2. I knew it looked wrong. I knew it was losing from the game. My calculation was clearly losing. But then when I started looking, it's like, well, it's better, but it's not clearly lost. But there's this very nice bishop takes a2 in between. King c1 takes. Now even bishop c4, and this is just clearly winning. Now I can create a passed a pawn, go down to a2. And white can't really do anything here, especially with an open king as well. So one or two rooks better than a queen? I would say more often than not, if the rooks don't have outposts or the rooks don't have access to both sides of the board, they're always going to be worse than the queen. Especially when it's two rooks straight up against the queen, unless you have a passed pawn on one side of the board. But more often than not, the queen is better than the rook. More often than not. So after rook c8, I was calculating all these moves. So as we talked about, queen f2, queen e7, this idea of rook c2 and bishop a2 is just dominating. If white plays queen f3, I think I still just play queen e7. Was queen e7 the move I was going to play, or king g7? I think queen e7 is the move I was going to, or not queen e7, sorry, queen g7 is the move I was going to play. And I think if rook f2, there's this very nasty idea a3, with the idea of using this dark square bishop, or sorry, this dark square queen on the dragon diagonal to mate white on b2. And after a3, if white tries like knight d3, I think I can take, because I've got crazy ideas like bishop a2 and rook a8 or queen a7 with checkmate. And this should just be really good for black, I think. So in this position, everything's going to come down the a file. Again, white's got all these pieces on the f file trying to mate me, but he doesn't have any access squares on f7 or f8. So my queen is the one piece that's preventing all this, and now I'm just free to use my rooks and just like mate him on the a file or on the c file here, and this should be really good for black. So for that reason, Ray did not play queen f3. Ray actually here played the losing move. He played rook to f6, which loses here. It's hard to understand why it loses. It seems like not a very obvious, obviously bad move. I think Ray thought he could take advantage, because if I take, I can't. If I take on b2, he takes. I go queen c2, king a1, a3. Looks like I'm mating him here, because if white plays queen f2, I can play queen c1, rook c1, rook c1 with checkmate. If he plays knight d3, maybe there's no mate, but I can just make a draw back and forth on c2 and c3. But unfortunately here, and if queen d4, it's the same mate, by the way. Queen d4 stops queen b2, but I mate him this way again as before. But unfortunately in this position, white can go queen to b3. Queen takes c1, rook c1. Well, first of all, queen b3 covers both of these two key squares here. And then secondly, when I trade takes and play rook c1, he blocks with queen b1. And white just wins, because if I take, I'm just down a rook. White is an extra rook on e6. So for that reason, rook b2 doesn't work. I also can't take the knight, because the rook and the queen both defend it here. So so it looks like white is holding here. But unfortunately, I have this very nice tact here. To see, if I have to play like queen e7, it's a distraction, because I have to move my queen away from the attack and come back and defend my king. So if I have to do this, then it's very difficult. Black might still be better here, but it changes the momentum, and this is not what you want to do. So that's why I played rook takes c2. Does rook b8 work? Rook f8 might work instead of queen b3 as well. But anyway, back to the game. I played rook c2. Ray took, because again, the queen and the rook protect the knight on c1. But he misses very nice in between. Had I calculated this before he played rook f6? Yes. When I played rook fc8, I had calculated this line. I had calculated this line, not completely to the end, but I had calculated to at least a draw. So here I played queen to c4, hitting the rooks on e6 and f1. White can't play rook f6, because then I just made him on c1. So the only way to protect the rooks is to re-coordinate them and protect each other. But now with the queen on c4 stopping these threats on the diagonal, I can play a3 here. And I had pretty much calculated all this to the end. I knew that after ba3, well, okay, let's show some other lines. So the one line that looks like white's okay here is rook f2, because if I take on f2, white can take, and he supports the pawn on b2. There's no check on c2. I can't take the knight. He's also, if I take on e4 and king a1, if I try like rook c2, there's just queen f8 mate, because the rook and the queen are both on the f file. And if I don't take, if I take, he just takes. My king is so wide open here. He's got queen b3 check coming, and he's just up a piece here clearly. So white's doing very well here. So for that reason, I can't play rook takes f2. So here I play. Mana Spalda 12. How's it going, everybody? Is mana the same mana, or is that some other mana? I don't know. Anyway, rook f2. But the problem with rook f2 here is that I can play rook takes b2 check. If white goes king a1, then I play rook takes f2. If white plays queen takes f2, it's the same thing. Check, check, and mate, because the pawn covers the b2 square. So white can't do that. And if white can't play king a1, white has to trade. But the problem with takes ab2 now is that here I'm hitting the rook on f1, I'm hitting the knight on c1, and I'm threatening checkmate on c2. So white can't play like knight d3, cutting off the rook, because then queen c2 is checkmate. If white tries knight b3, there's also checkmate. White can't move the rook. Rook f2, I just make a queen and I mate him this way. So for that reason, the only move that white can play where he doesn't get mated or lose material is queen b3. But after queen b3, I make a queen. White takes. We trade. And I just trade and I go g5, h5, bring the king up. And black is up a pawn here. I can create an outside pass pawn eventually. And eventually I'll win this pawn and make a queen down here or a queen down here. So this is just a winning king and pawn endgame. So for that reason, Ray saw the idea, and here he played b takes a3. So I took the pawn. Now the same mating ideas apply both ways. It's also worth noting one other mate that I didn't show yet is that if white plays, let's just say b3, rook b2, king a1. Well, I guess here rook b1 takes, queen c2 is also checkmate. But even if he takes, and let's just say he plays a random move like rook f3, for example, is that I can play rook b2, king a1, queen c2, and there's no way white can stop checkmate on b1 from the rook or the queen. He has queen b3, I guess, but every other way it loses. So if you move the knight, then you undefend a2 and get mated that way as well. So there's no way to stop the mate threats on b1 and a2 here. So for that reason, this is losing as well, which I also saw at the start. I saw if white just passes with a random move, there's always rook b2, queen c2, rook b1 ideas. Well, rook f2 is the, or yeah, rook b2, rook b1 mates as well, obviously. But like one idea would be knight b3 here, and then rook b2, king a1, queen c2. And again, white can't defend this square on a2 without getting mated on b1. There's just no way to stop mate. So for that reason, this is just the mating box around white's king is just way too much. So here Ray played queen takes a3. Now I played rook takes c1. Ray played rook takes c1, queen takes e4 check, hitting the king. White goes king b2, queen e5 check. Now I'm hitting the king and I'm hitting the rook. He plays rook c3. Worth noting, if he goes king b1 here, I can just play rook b8 check, same as in the game, king c2, queen f6, and I'm just winning. Someone says queen d3 stops mate. Yes, queen d3. Okay, so let's show this then. I know I'll just make a random move. I know that I have rook b1, but queen d3 does not stop mate here because I go rook b1. It's checkmate. Queen d3 does not stop mate. White can't stop mate. It's just this box around the king. White just can't stop these checkmates here. It's just it's a very nasty little box where white can't stop it. Yes, white can always throw in a check, but it makes no difference. Takes, queen f4, king g8. You have no checks. The king is completely safe. And again, you just get mated. It's just a complete box around the white king. I am Rosen says this game is going to inspire me to play the dragon. That is awesome to hear, Mr. I am Rosen. Yeah, I mean, it's just a complete box, and it's just checkmate. So someone says rook a2 mates. Yeah, everything mates, but basically the whole point is that once you get this little box around the white king with this assortment of pieces, there's nothing white can do to stop checkmate in multiple ways. So Ray played queen takes a3, only move really to try and stop it, but now there's this very nasty tactic with queen e5 check, hitting the king and the rook. Ray played rook c3. Now I played rook b8. Important move. Normally it would be nice if you could just play queen f6, king f8, and trade into this endgame. But unfortunately, this king and pawn endgame, despite having split pawns, trying to make 3 separate queens, this is actually a draw because after king e7, white pushes, king c6, king d4. And now if you try h5, white goes a7, king b7, king d5, g5, king takes d6, h4, king e5, g4, king f4, h3 takes king g3, and white gets back just in the nick of time here to make the draw. So for that reason, you can't just play simple and go into this endgame. But there's just a rook b8 check first, king c2, queen f6, and now white's king is still open. Black is also up a pawn here, and I am Rosen says gotta go now, but keep it up, Naka. Thank you so much, Mr. Eric Rosen. Also a streamer as well. Saw him in St. Louis. He's a streamer. He takes amazing pictures. And yeah, he's an IM. So very strong chess player. So I will see you around, Mr. Eric Rosen, the one and only. So king c2, queen f6. Here, Ray played rook f3, queen to d4, rook to b3, queen e4, king c1. Not much explanation needed for the next couple of moves. But mainly, I want to keep the king in check here instead of giving him a chance to kind of untangle by putting a rook on c3 and maybe a queen on b3 or b2. So it's important not to let him untangle. So king b1, queen d1, queen c1. So after queen to c1 here, it's worth noting, I think instead of queen d1, maybe rook c8 here was stronger. Maybe there was a way. I think queen d3, maybe check king a1, rook c8 was threatening mate, and this should be winning quicker than what I did in the game. But like it didn't really occur to me during the game to see this, and also we're right at time control. So when I saw that I have king b1, queen d1, if white goes king b2, then rook c8 threatens queen c1 checkmate because of the box here around white's king. White plays rook c3, then I have queen d2 check, hitting the king and the rook, and white can't save the rook. If you move the king, I just take. If you go king b1, I just take. And if you play rook c2, I also just take with the queen. So here white can't salvage the rook on c3. And at the same time, queen c1's mate. White plays like rook b4, then you have check, king b3, queen c2 checkmate as well. The queen and the rook getting in the way of white's king here. But after queen d1, white can play queen c1. Now I know the computers give queen d3 as being better, but I knew that going into this line that this is simply winning, as I have 2 extra pawns. My king is relatively safe, and his king is really far away from the action here. So Ray played king a1, check, 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 queen c5, queen d2, h5. Basically just put the queen on a nice square here where he can never go to like e2, because then I check him and I trade the queens. Ray went queen d2, h5, king b1, king g7, queen b2. Thank you, Mr. Ace Rothstein for subscribing with Twitch Prime. So here I played queen e5, queen b7, king h6. Again, king is very safe behind these pawns here on g6, h5, queen on e5. Very solid in the center here. Always checks all over the place against the white queen, so I can just run my king all the way up the board and munch on g2. Is this winning even if black wastes the move, or does white get a perpetual? No, this is completely winning. After queen takes b3, if black wastes the move, I mean, like if I just play a random move like queen b4, even this I think is winning, because check, queen d7. Even this is winning as well, king g5. If you take the pawn, I probably can just check and pick up this pawn on g2. If you check, I can probably play like queen g4, or even king f5, queen h3, king e5, and eventually the king's going to find cover behind the pawns, with the queen being able to block as well. So it's winning regardless of whether I waste a move or not. But of course, there's no reason to waste a move. So king h6, king c1. Now here I play d5. Again, another move, closing the diagonal to g2. Also, I'll just put the queen on e4, just slowly inch up the board. inch the queen and the d pawn up the board, or run the king straight up and then make a queen on h1 or g1. So here Ray played king d1, played queen e4, keeping with the theme. Just inch up the board, put the queen on another nice square where it's supported by the pawn, hit the pawn on g2 as well. So Ray plays queen b2. Now again, just keep inching up the board, put the queen here, pawn here, inch the king up the board, then eventually use the h and g pawns as well. So Ray played queen to d2. Here I played king to g4. Ray played queen h6. And now after g5, Ray resigned in view of the fact that now he can't protect the g2 pawn. I'm just marching with the king and the pawn, maybe the d pawn as well, but mainly just the g2 pawn is hanging. So white is just going to be losing a third pawn, and then there also are never any ideas. So if I in this position, even if you get this, it's so hard to attack the king, because after king h3 I can just run the king up the board. So like even if you get the max here with queen e5 king h1, you still can't check, because then I have queen g1 with your king being on the back rank, and now I can just run the pawn straight up the board, and the king is completely secure here on h1. So for that reason, this is just winning for black. So that's why Ray resigned after I played g5 here. Should he have resigned earlier? You could maybe say that Ray could have resigned earlier, but I understood that he was frustrated, and so he was just prolonging it for a little bit, just to sort of get it out of his system. So he could have resigned sooner, but it's not, I mean, I understand why he didn't. So all right, so this was round 9 against Ray Robson from the US Championship that I won. So with this win, it moved me up to 6.5 out of 9 games, or plus 4, which was very important, because Lenier was already, by the point we reached about move 35, I could sense that Lenier was going to be winning his game. And Fabiano was also winning his game pretty quickly against Varuj and Akobian. So it was very important to win this game. Thank you, Nimbio Victus, for subscribing with Twitch Prime. It was very important to win this game and keep pace. So I did win this game. Lenier would go on to win his game as well, and Fabiano would win his game too. So that put me on plus 4, along with Lenier, with Fabiano winning as well. He was on plus 3. So we were both half a point ahead of Fabiano going into our very critical round 10 matchup, where I had the white piece against Lenier. And so I will be showing that game shortly.